Angus Cloud's family home was tucked in a quiet residential pocket of Oakland, California, not ostentatious or palatial, but modest and deeply personal. It sat at the edge of a cul-de-sac, with a cracked stone walkway and a weathered fence overgrown with ivy. After his untimely passing in 2023, the property remained untouched for over a year. It wasn't a celebrity mansion, but a lived-in home echoing with memories, fame, grief, and something harder to name. The house went on the market quietly in 2024. There was no public listing, no tours, just a few calls placed to people who might understand its significance, as the agent phrased it. That's how Max and Elena Roth ended up there. Max and Elena were in their early 30s, creatives from LA looking to get away from the noise. She worked in post-production for film, he was a freelance photographer. They didn't care that the house once belonged to someone famous. They liked the bones, the odd layout, the untouched backyard that backed up against a dense cluster of trees. When they moved in, they kept the place mostly the same. They even kept some of the furniture. Angus had used an old leather couch, a low-slung table in the den. It felt like good luck to preserve what came before them. That feeling didn't last long. The first few nights were calm, quiet even, but it started with noises, soft, padded footfalls down the hallway after midnight, always stopping just outside their bedroom door. No wind, no creaks, just deliberate steps, then nothing. Max, curious and skeptical, checked the motion sensors he had installed himself. They triggered at 3:17 a.m. 3 nights in a row. Same hallway, no visible intruders, no malfunctions. Then came the scent, at random hours. Cigarettes and cologne, thick and familiar. Elena didn't recognize it. Max said it smelled like an old backstage dressing room. There was a small spare room that Angus had reportedly used to record videos and isolate when he needed peace. Elena began using it as a small editing bay. One day, while reviewing footage for a client, the screen flickered briefly, showing a reflection behind her in the edit window. A face, out of focus but watching. She turned around. Nothing. But when she paused the timeline, the reflection remained in that frame, like it had been burned into the footage. Max brushed it off until he found the same face in a photo he took weeks later, standing in the far background of a shot he swore was empty when captured. Same house, same angle, same presence. The master bathroom had a narrow mirror above the sink. On 3 separate occasions, Elena claimed she saw someone behind her, not directly in the reflection, but in the corner of her eye, just over her shoulder. The moment she turned, it vanished. One morning, Max found the mirror shattered. Not from a fall. From pressure, it seemed spider-webbed from the center, like someone had punched it from the inside. Elena started sleeping with headphones in. Max stopped using the darkroom in the garage. Late one night in February, Elena was woken by what she thought was Max talking in the living room. But the voice didn't sound like his, it was slow, muffled, like someone half awake. She crept out and found the lights on, the record player spinning an old hip-hop track they never played. Max was still asleep in bed. After that night, the house changed. Cold spots lingered in doorways. Doors locked on their own. They stopped inviting friends over. Eventually, Max reached out to Angus's surviving relatives. He didn't ask for help, just wanted to know more about him. A cousin responded kindly but carefully. She told them Angus had loved the house, even though it had always made him a little uneasy growing up. He used to say, "There's something about that hallway, like it's watching." He reportedly never stayed alone there after he got famous. By spring of 2025, Max and Elena packed up without telling their neighbors. No dramatic stories, no interviews. They left furniture behind, again this time by choice. The house was empty by April, still unlisted. The agent says the property is between owners. The lights sometimes flicker on at night. Neighbors report music playing softly from inside. No one's seen anyone enter or leave in months. But once, a local boy swore he saw a man standing at the window, hood up, arms crossed, just watching, and he looked just like him. Angus, not smiling, just still, like he was waiting for something, or someone, Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story. The Roths didn't talk much about the house anymore. By the third month, their conversations were clipped, and their movements around the place had become more deliberate. They no longer drifted from room to room like new homeowners discovering possibilities. They moved as if walking through something dense and invisible. Elena started leaving lights on in the hallways, even during the day. Max, once an obsessive planner who carefully managed their budget, now ignored the electricity bill altogether. The backyard, which they had once dreamed of turning into a wildflower garden with a little pergola, was overgrown again. Neither of them had stepped beyond the back steps in weeks. There was a patch of soil near the edge of the fence that remained damp no matter the weather. Elena had noticed it the second week after they moved in. At first, she assumed it was a pipe leak, but plumbers found nothing. The smell near that patch was faint but distinct, like cold metal and damp paper. Sometimes, just past twilight, the motion-sensitive porch light in the back would flicker on. Always 3 times. Always exactly 3. The layout of the house had begun to feel skewed. Though the square footage was unchanged, Max would often find himself turning corners and arriving at rooms too soon or too late. The hallway near the master bedroom had grown oddly silent. No floor creaks, no air circulation hum. When you stood in it, time felt paused, like the house was holding its breath. Max once stood in that hallway for nearly 15 minutes, just standing, not thinking about anything in particular. When Elena finally found him, he didn't respond to her voice until she physically touched his shoulder. He flinched, eyes wide, confused. He didn't remember going there. The den, what used to be Angus's creative space, was off-limits now. Unspoken. The door remained closed, though neither of them could recall shutting it. One morning, Elena noticed something thin and dark wedged under the doorframe. She bent down and pulled out a torn strip of photograph. The corner of a face. Part of a mouth. One cloudy eye. Definitely film, not digital. They hadn't printed any photos since moving in. In the guest bedroom, Elena began storing some of her unused production gear. Tripods, a lighting rig, a crate of old cords. While rearranging the closet shelves, she noticed a panel in the back wall. Thin, hollow-sounding. She pushed it. It creaked open to reveal a narrow mirror nailed directly to the wall behind it. Old, dull. The kind of mirror you might find in the back of a gas station bathroom in the 90s. Elena stared into it for a long time. There was something wrong with the reflection. It wasn't reversed. The room behind her in the mirror was the same, but not flipped. No mirror does that. And there was someone standing behind her in the reflection. She turned instantly. Nobody. When she looked back at the mirror again, it showed only the closet. The reflection was gone. Max, who had once made his living capturing clean, abstract architectural lines, had taken up photographing the house obsessively, almost compulsively. He said he was trying to catch it. At first, Elena thought he meant a raccoon or stray animal that might be causing the noises. But no, he meant something else. His photos started to pile up, hundreds of Polaroids, film reels, digital shots. Some were of the living room at dusk, some of the kitchen table in different light. But a handful were repeatedly taken from the same position, angled down the main hallway, just outside the den. Each photo showed a progression. First, empty hallway. Then, faint blurring at the far end. Next, the shape of a person hunched. Then closer, standing. Then, a clear outline. Face obscured, arms hanging unnaturally long at the sides. Finally, the hallway empty again. In the last photo, Max had scrawled something on the back. "I think he knows I see him now." They didn't argue anymore. Not about the house. Not about selling it. Not even about what was happening inside it. It was as if the house had drained them of the will to confront anything directly. Sometimes, Max would sit in the kitchen for hours, staring at the empty chair across from him. His eyes wouldn't blink often. Elena noticed he'd started muttering to himself under his breath, short phrases she couldn't quite make out. One night she crept closer and finally heard it. He was whispering the same 4 words, over and over. "I didn't mean to." Despite the tension, the sealed den remained closed for weeks. Then, one night, Elena heard it. It was subtle at first, just a low hum through the door. She pressed her ear to the wood. The sound was rhythmic, like someone murmuring over a beat, familiar in cadence. She couldn't quite make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. Grief, laced with pain and regret. When she pulled away, she realized her cheek had left a faint imprint on the door's surface. The wood had become ice cold, and her earlobe specifically, was bleeding. A single drop, as if punctured by a pin from the inside. 2 weeks later, a car began parking across the street. Midnight or later, headlights off. Same silver SUV. It never stayed longer than 15 minutes. Just idled, then pulled away. Max once walked out barefoot at 1 a.m. and approached it. The car drove off. No license plate on the front. When he came back inside, he said nothing. But that night, he locked every door, bolted the windows, and then sat awake until sunrise, staring down the hallway again, camera on his lap. He never explained what he saw, and Elena never asked. Elena began recording audio. It started as a nervous habit, leaving her phone on the nightstand with the voice memo app running while they slept. She didn't know what she expected to hear. Maybe the soft tap of the hallway steps again. Maybe the static pulse that sometimes filled the room like an invisible fog. Maybe nothing at all. But on the fourth morning, she listened back and dropped the phone. At exactly 3:17 a.m., the same time the hallway motion lights had always triggered, there was a whisper. Not loud, not clear, but unmistakably human. She isolated the clip, looped it 5 times. Max listened, too, and they both heard it. A breath, and then a phrase like it came from inches away. Get out, I'm still here. Max didn't say anything for a long time. Then he got up, walked to the kitchen, and came back with a roll of duct tape. He placed it over the vent in their bedroom, then did the same to the one in the hallway, then the living room. Eliminate echoes, he muttered. But Elena had seen his hands. They were trembling. The walls in the den were painted matte black, something Angus had done himself years ago, apparently to get in the zone. According to an old interview Max found online, the space had a strange acoustics to it. Even from the outside, sounds around the door would distort, as if the room swallowed and flattened all noise. One late afternoon, while Max was away, Elena couldn't resist. She opened the door. The air inside was thick, stagnant. Not dusty, just still, as though it had never properly circulated. She stepped inside, careful, cautious, and clicked the light switch. It didn't work, but the corners of the room glowed faintly, a strange reddish tone, like ambient light seeping from nowhere. The far wall had something new on it. Scratches, not painted, not drawn, scratched into the wall, deep enough to reveal the drywall beneath. They were letters, scattered, chaotic, like someone had started writing something, then stopped, then started again in another direction. But one word repeated several times. Regret. And beneath it something smaller. So small she had to crouch low and tilt her head sideways to make it out. This isn't who I was. That night the smell returned. Not faint anymore. Strong. Heavy. Like burnt plastic and cologne. Elena opened windows, sprayed the air, lit 3 candles. Nothing worked. She slept in the guest room with a towel under the door. Max stayed in the bedroom, claiming it didn't bother him. In the middle of the night, she woke to the sound of a lighter being flicked again and again. She opened her eyes and sat up, heart pounding. It was coming from inside the room. There was no one there, but on the table by the window, a small flicker of light flashed twice more, like an invisible thumb rolling the wheel of a lighter. She turned on the lamp. The light stopped, and in the soft orange glow, she saw it her mirror on the dresser had fogged slightly, as though someone had exhaled directly onto it. Over the next week, Max became increasingly distant. He spent most of his time in the garage, surrounded by stacks of printed photos. He wouldn't let Elena look anymore. When she asked what he was trying to find, he answered vaguely, the right frame. The one that matters. He didn't sleep much, or eat. His skin took on a pale, grayish tint, and his eyes looked slightly sunken, like he'd spent too long underwater. One night, Elena found him standing completely still in the hallway. The lights were off. He was facing the den, not moving. When she touched his shoulder, he turned slowly, almost mechanically. "She was in there with him," he whispered. Elena tried to get him to explain, but he wouldn't speak again that night. In a drawer under the old entertainment unit, Elena found a single VHS tape in a clear plastic sleeve. No label, no date. She had to borrow a VCR from the neighbor to watch it. The footage was rough. Static lines, grainy picture, low hum in the background. The tape showed the inside of the house, this house. Same furniture layout as before. Same lighting, but something was off. The angles were slightly too high, as if the camera had been mounted up near the ceiling. Surveillance style. The footage showed someone, presumably Angus, moving from room to room. Sometimes he was talking, sometimes just pacing, but never looking at the camera. He seemed agitated, sleepless. At one point, he sat in the hallway with his back against the wall, head in his hands. Then the screen went dark for a few seconds. When the image returned, the perspective had changed. It now showed the den, but there was no one in the room, just the faint red glow. And in the center, something had begun to form a shape, slowly gathering shadow. Then the screen cut out again. Elena hit rewind. Fast forward. The same. That part of the tape had recorded itself over. After that night, the house no longer whispered in single voices. It whispered in layers. Elena would hear fragments of conversations in the vents, under the floorboards, in the static of the baby monitor they didn't even use. Some sounded angry. Others sounded afraid. One, a woman's voice, kept repeating a phrase softly, almost kindly. "It's okay now. You're not alone. You're not alone." Max began answering back. One night, Elena found him standing at the window, facing the backyard. He was mumbling the phrase back to himself. "You're not alone. You're not alone." When she approached, he said something else, something quiet, with a cracked voice. "But maybe I should be." Shadows began to appear in places light couldn't reach. Not cast by anything. They existed in and of themselves. Under the dining room table. Along the ceiling corners. Reflected in TV screens when they were turned off. One night, the oven light turned on by itself, illuminating the kitchen in a strange yellow hue. Elena walked in and froze. On the floor, reflected in the glossy tile, was the shape of someone standing in front of her. Tall, broad shoulders, head tilted slightly. But when she looked up, there was no one there. The shadows didn't leave. They began to feel like part of the structure, like smoke sealed beneath the paint, like static stitched into the walls. It was no longer about what was haunting the house, but how deep it had settled in. The house didn't feel like a place where something had happened, it felt like a place where something was still happening, unfolding slowly, like a film reel stuck between frames. Max no longer made eye contact with Elena. He wandered the house barefoot, unshaven, whispering half-formed thoughts to himself. Sometimes he held his camera up, not to take a photo, but as if it were a shield, like the lens might protect him. Elena started seeing things she didn't dare speak aloud. A figure crouched behind the couch just before she entered the room. A hand resting on the stair rail when she knew she was alone. Her own face in the mirror, but not moving with her. Not blinking, just staring. It had been a dry week, but that night the wind kicked up out of nowhere. The trees around the property bent like they were trying to run. The sky pulsed in flickers, not lightning, something paler, quieter. Elena was already awake when the first bang hit the hallway wall. It sounded like a body slamming against plaster. She bolted upright, but Max wasn't in bed. She found him in the den. The door had been left wide open, the strange red glow from inside pulsing gently like a heartbeat. He was on his knees, surrounded by photographs, hundreds of them, scattered like fallen leaves. All of them showed the same hallway, same angle, same slow approach of the figure. But in the last photograph, it had reached the camera. Elena stepped in slowly. The air was impossibly cold. Her breath came out in clouds. The walls seemed to throb around them, like the house itself was breathing. Max was crying. Not sobbing. Just silent tears. leaking down his cheeks, eyes locked forward. "I tried to show him," he said. "I tried to say sorry." Elena followed his gaze. The far wall of the den where the scratches had once been was now smooth, clean. But as they stared, words began to appear slowly, one at a time, etched into the paint by an unseen hand. "It was never about you." The red light deepened. Then a shape stepped forward from the corner slowly, as though forming from vapor. A tall silhouette, familiar in posture. Hoodie, loose shoulders. Not angry, not terrifying, just unbearably sad. The room crackled with tension, like a voice waiting to speak. And then it did. "I was trying to come back," it said. Not with sound, but in their heads, like a memory spoken too close to the soul. The voice was Angus's, younger, fragile, the kind you hear when someone is high and scared and trying to hold it together. "I didn't know I'd stay." Elena couldn't move. Neither could Max. The figure looked at them both not with blame, but like he was trying to remember who they were. Or maybe who he was. "I didn't mean to leave the house like this," the voice continued. "I just never left at all." He looked down at the photographs. Max knelt, slowly, and slid one toward him, the last photo. The shadow in the picture was staring directly at the lens. And now, standing in front of them, Angus's figure mimicked the exact same position. He reached out, a hand lowering toward the photo, but his fingers went through it like smoke. His form began to flicker. Elena felt a sharp pressure in her chest, like grief trying to push its way through her ribs. "You can go," she whispered. The lights in the den dimmed, then brightened. And then he smiled, just barely. The shape folded inward on itself, like smoke caught in a vacuum. The light blinked once, and then silence. No pulse, no breath, no weight in the room. Just Max and Elena, sitting among the photos in a room that suddenly felt like any other. No cold, no scent, just stillness. Outside, the wind had stopped. The trees stood upright. And for the first time in months, the house felt like a house. They stayed one more week. Cleaned, sorted, repaired what they could. Max boxed up the photographs and sealed them tight. He didn't look at them again. Elena recorded one final voice memo from the center of the hallway. The tape was silent, no whispers, no static. They left behind the couch, the scratched mirror, and the den. But they took something with them, a heaviness that never fully left. Not fear, not even sadness, but the deep, solemn knowledge that someone had hurt in that house. Someone had tried to find peace and got trapped between memories and fame and forgetting. Someone had haunted it not because they wanted to stay, but because they didn't know how to leave. The house in Oakland remains quiet. Neighbors say it's empty, but the lawn is trimmed and the curtains are always drawn neatly at the same time each evening. No one ever sees who does it. Sometimes, at dusk, kids on bikes say they hear low music coming from inside something old, fuzzy, with a lo-fi beat. And in the far upstairs window, if you glance quick enough, you might see a figure leaning against the glass. Not waving, not watching, just there, waiting, or maybe just remembering. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story.